Hey, what's going on, Mission Hills Church? Welcome back to the Continuing the Conversation feed here on our Messages podcast. You're back with your host, Colin, and
I'm Craig.
And we are very excited for this. We are, home stretch probably isn't the right way to put it, but we've got one more week in our Beyond series, not the Beyond campaign. This is kind of almost the first step out the door into this big journey that we're about to take over the next 2 years, honestly.
Yeah, that's true. It's a good way to think about it because, it's a 17-year kind of journey to our 100-year anniversary, and the Beyond Initiative really it's a 2-year kind of intention to accelerate our movement towards the 100-year mark. So it's like we're not crossing any kind of a finish line this weekend. This is it's a significant moment in the life of the church.
It's almost like we've been training, doing various things for about a year, and we're about to step on the plane to fly over to the Himalayas and getting ready to hike Everest at this point.
That's right. Yeah, that's a good way to think about it.
How does that feel? I mean, you have done laid so much groundwork, so much prep work to get us, the congregation and the staff, to this point where we're ready to kind of launch, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this vision. I'm excited about where God's leading us at that 100-year mark. There's a lot of unknowns about it, and a lot of people have been asking really good questions about what exactly does this look like, and how do you define a healthy church? And because our vision is to make sure that everybody's within 10 minutes of a healthy church or multiple healthy churches. And so there's been really good questions, but there's still a lot of stuff to figure out. But I'm really excited about where God's going to take us. I really think when we hit that 100-year mark, we're going to look around and go, the Front Range is a different place because of what God's done here. And it's certainly not exclusively through Mission Hills, but I do think we're going to play a significant role in what he does, and especially excited about the work in encouraging and empowering other churches to be what God's called them to be. And just the fact that we get the chance to be part of that, that's pretty special.
This is really cool, and we kind of get this this capstone here kind of coming out this next weekend where we're going to have all of the commitments come in, and then a couple weeks after Easter, we'll be able to announce that and do a little bit of direction moving forward and everything. So we're kind of at this really, as you would say, a catalytic moment for where the Beyond Initiative looks right now. So can you give us a little sneak peek into how we're going to close things out here? Maybe a little bit of the messaging that's going to kind of go into the final week here.
Yeah, so we're going to take a look at a story that God put in my heart. I'd never really thought about it as a giving story, but it really is. And
that is a good reflection for the series. I feel like we've had a lot of those.
Yeah, so we're going to take a look at the calling of the first disciples when Jesus was teaching and the miraculous catch of fish. And what I've realized is it's actually less about the catch of fish than it is the fact that they let Jesus borrow the boat. Because here's the thing, that. And again, I don't know how many people are going to listen to this. I don't want to give too much of away, but Jesus can walk on water, right? We see that later on, right? So Jesus doesn't need a boat. But at a certain point in this particular story, Jesus gets into a boat and stands there to preach. Now, how much more powerful would the preaching have been if he just walked out on the water and stood on the surface of the water? The crowd would have gone crazy, right? Instantaneous. We know who this guy is now. Why get in the boat when you can stand on the water? And the answer is he didn't really need the boat, but they needed to give him the boat.
I wonder if people would have been a little too distracted by it. It's like every time an angel appears for the first time, they say, do not be afraid. So Jesus walks out in the middle of the water, and his first message probably would have had to have been, do not be afraid.
He could have given them a little time to get used to it, though. And I guarantee you they would have been locked in.
Oh, but... Yeah, can you imagine?
Yeah, and the other thing, and we see this a lot, is that the boat features pretty prominently in the ministry. They're constantly kind of going around and to visiting. But again, Jesus, they could have walked around the lake. It wasn't that big a lake. Jesus could have walked across the lake. He did it sometimes. So why the boat? Yeah, there's something powerful there that we'll unpack a little bit.
That's really cool, and I think the continual thread of kind of fish playing such a huge part in kind of some of these stories, I think ties back into the message this weekend really well. And this week, if you guys hadn't listened to the message yet, I would highly encourage you to go back to make a little more sense out of Craig and I's conversation today. But we talked about, the feeding of the loaves and the bread, and I wanted to touch on you today. You mentioned it a little bit in our in the Beyond video that we have on the website, and a little bit in the message too about kind of the financial situation, kind of regarding the disciples a little bit. And there's kind of this allusion in one of the translations to we might have the funds and, we could pay for this. I wanted to push into that a little bit here about this, maybe not misconception, but maybe just preconception of, Jesus and his disciples kind of living off of everybody's generosity wherever they went. Maybe they didn't quite have the means that they might have. And I just want to kind of push into this aspect of what maybe things looked like financially for them. It's a really interesting concept that you pushed into.
Yeah, so I've been kind of working through it lately, and it's interesting to me. I think most people, Christian or non-Christian, kind of have this assumption when they think about Jesus and the disciples, and that is that they were impoverished. It's this poor itinerant preacher, and it's almost kind of like the poor pride thing that goes on. Like, well, of course, because to be truly spiritual, you have to be not, connected to material wealth or financial means or those kinds of things. And so, if Jesus is deeply spiritual, then he must have also been poor. There's almost like this idea they have to go together. But ironically, the flip side of that is, if Jesus was poor, then it actually allows a lot of us to sort of dismiss a lot of what he had to say about money. Because well, of course, a poor person would say that about money. And we're not consciously doing that, although I do think there are non-Christians who do quite consciously do that. Yeah, Jesus said it's hard for the rich to enter the kingdom of heaven. Well, of course, he was poor, right? So of course he was going to be anti-rich. That's just the way it goes, right? But I think even sort of subtly, we do this as believers. We kind of downplay, well, Jesus didn't have much, so of course we would expect him to be kind of negative about money. But what if he did have money? And so you see in this miracle, we talked about this last week, we always assume that, the apostles' objection was, we don't have the kind of money it would take to buy this, but that's not what they say. It's very clear in all of 4 of the Gospels where it occurs that they are questioning whether or not it makes sense to spend it. They never say, which would be the easiest thing in the world to say, geez, we just don't have it, right? Like if you don't have it, that's what you say. They clearly have it, or they wouldn't be asking this question. So I think that's a good indication they had money. I mentioned that Judas was able to take from the money bag whenever he wanted, and apparently there was still money for them to do what they needed. There's no mention that they suddenly couldn't afford food or lodging because Judas had stolen all the money. No, they had enough in the bag that he could take whatever he wanted, and they were still okay. But here's the really wild thing, though. I'm not sure that Jesus didn't have money growing up.
Which is really interesting.
Yeah. Think about this. So in Luke, when Mary and Joseph go to Jerusalem to offer the purification, they offer 2 doves. Now, in Leviticus, that is the offering specified for a poor family. So if they can't afford a lamb or one of the other sacrifices, then the doves, that's the cheapest thing they could do. So clearly, Mary and Joseph started off with no money. But a little bit later in Luke, we see the whole family, Mary, Joseph, and Jesus, going to Jerusalem, and it says that they went every year. That was not something a poor family could afford to do. So what happened between they're clearly poor and offering the poor person sacrifice and they're going every year? I think if I got the timeline right, the Magi came. Mm-hmm. And the Magi offered very expensive gifts, which is what probably would allowed them to live in Egypt. But I wonder if that actually didn't change the financial picture of the family completely. So Joseph is an artisan. We call him a carpenter. It's interesting. That's not necessarily the way to translate that word. It could be, but it basically means craftsman. It could be for working in wood. It could be working in stone. It could be working in metal. It was also the same word used for blacksmiths. But it wasn't a day laborer. It's a totally different term for the person who basically just, what job can I get this day? At the very least, this would have made him middle class. And there was there was a lot of construction going on in this part of the first century in very nearby areas, so there was a lot of work to be done. And it's interesting too. Think about this: when Jesus died, there was an argument over his cloak, over his tunic. Actually, not his cloak, his tunic. And John describes it as a seamless garment. That was an expensive garment. It was not the kind of thing that a poor person owned. It was the kind of thing that presumably he had his adult life. But that meant his family was able to afford a really high-quality garment that most people didn't have. All that says to me, I actually think Jesus may have had more money than we tend to think that he did, which I think casts his statements about money in a very different light. Even if you get rid of the unconscious thing, right? And we go, well, yeah, of course he's going to say negative things about money if he doesn't have any, right? And negative things about rich people if he doesn't have. But what if he's actually coming out of a context where he's like, no, I've seen what money's done maybe to his family, we don't know, but to the people around me, the social circles that we're moving in, I've seen the struggles with money. I've seen how easily it can get in the way of your relationship with God. Not as I'm kind of bitter because I don't have it, because no, I'm actually deeply concerned as a shepherd for people that I've seen deeply hurt by their inability to handle it in a healthy way. I just think the idea that Jesus and his disciples maybe had more money than we think casts what he has to say about money in a very different light.
That's really interesting. It almost makes me think of the story where the man came to him and he goes, "How do I follow you?" And he said, give up all your earthly possessions and, and come follow me. He doesn't say, take everything you have, sell it, and give my ministry the money for it so we can move on to the next town.
I love that.
It is a really, it kind of casts that story a little bit differently because he's thinking about, kind of, as we say here at Mission Hills, thinking about the kingdom, capital K, rather than just inside the four walls of the ministry.
Yeah. Well, okay. So here's the thing. When Jesus says, and come follow, maybe he, to that rich man, or maybe he doesn't just mean come follow me as the teacher, as the leader, as the Son of God, but maybe come follow me and do what I've done, which is maybe he's done exactly the same thing. Maybe he's given up a whole lot of that stuff. So here's an interesting thing. In the book of Corinthians, when Paul is writing, he says, and it's kind of a famous verse, that he who was rich became poor for our sakes. Talking about Jesus. And we always read that. I have always read it as, well, it's spirit. He gave up his position in heaven. But if you read it in context, right before it, Paul's talking about financial offerings, financial giving. And right after it, he goes back to financial giving. And right in the middle of it, he talks about Jesus being rich but becoming poor for our sakes. In the context, the more natural way to read rich is financially rich. He might be saying, now he might still be saying the spiritual stuff, it would still work, but the more natural flow of the context is going, yeah, Jesus had money. He gave it up, though. He gave it up to come and to preach and to die, right? So, maybe Jesus knew firsthand.
Which is also a great reflection of the pieces that we've been talking about beyond here is kind of these steps of giving too. So I mean, it's just the genesis of imitating what he's preaching here, where he's like, I have the means and I am giving it up for the ministry as I am asking you to do all these thousands of years later.
Yeah.
It's cool to lay the groundwork that way.
Yeah.
The other thing I think is really interesting coming out of this passage, you talked about the provision of food here with the loaves and the fish, as is reflected by kind of, the giving of manna when Moses was in the desert and everything. I want to talk to you a little bit, and this might just be you and me chasing something down a rabbit hole here.
Yeah, let's chase it.
What do you think it is about the stories in the Bible that relate so well to food? What do you think it is about us as spiritual beings, not necessarily relational. Maybe it is relational. You sit down over a meal or over a beverage and you're able to kind of commune. But why do you think it's such an easy entry point for the communication of all these stories to reach us through food so often?
Oh, interesting. That's a good question. I think there's probably a couple of things. One of them is we're a weird creation. We're both body and soul.
Preach.
And people will go, well, we're a soul-filled body or we're an embodied soul, and you kind of like which one really matters the most. But the Bible is just we're a closely interacting dualism, is the way we talk about it in theological. You really aren't human without the body or the soul. And I think sometimes in evangelicalism, conservative Christianity, we go, the soul's the most important. But to be the image of God actually requires a body. The very nature of the word requires a body, which is why when Jesus comes back, we get resurrection bodies, because we can't really be human without the body. So I don't think you can say one's more important than the other. So part of what's going on with food is simply, it's sort of an acknowledgement that this is a big part of who we are as God's creation. As
kind of taking care of our Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
So there's some of that, and I think there's probably this is the second piece. In the ancient world, at least, think about it. They didn't have refrigerators. They didn't have supermarkets. So getting food was it was a very time-consuming task, and it involved the clearest area of your life where you were in constant need and dependence, right? And we just don't have that today, right? Like, if the grocery stores all closed down, like, I'd probably be good for a month. I wouldn't enjoy it. What we'd be eating would not be great, but I'd be fine, right? That was not true in the ancient world. I mean, you typically, Jesus said, give us this day our daily bread because you weren't storing it for the most part. You just didn't have that option. And so I think a lot of the miracles probably revolve around food because that was the place where people felt their need most keenly. And so Jesus and God throughout the scripture are like he's doing something miraculous in an area where people felt the need for it. It's hard to feel the need for a miracle if you don't feel the need for the thing the miracle provides, right? Yeah.
No, I really like that. I also think it's, I was thinking about this before you and I started talking today. It's also, I think, a good reflection. We were talking about Joseph being an artisan of a good reflection of our creator as we are able to create. Also, I always think about, fine dining and all these different things as kind of an expressionism of artistry, kind of in its main sense too. So I think it is a good place too, where you can feel kind of that spiritual connection between us and our creator.
Well, I mean, there's
kind of the flip side of the coin.
There's definitely this idea that, like, food is a good thing, right? Not just because it keeps us fueled, but it's good. I mean, I think you and I share a similar kind of feeling for like really good food is just it's a powerful experience, right? It's not necessarily that it got me what I needed to get through the day or whatever, but it's like, no, I enjoyed that. And because I think we enjoy it so much, that's why it's a social thing too. Like enjoying good food together is a really powerful thing. And so there is some aspect of maybe it's the goodness of God in the fact that he made us to enjoy food, not just to need it, but to enjoy it, right? So I maybe some of the miracles that are revolving around food are also about just the goodness of God. Because like Jesus, when he turned the water into wine, it wasn't just water into wine, it was water into fine wine.
Oh,
right?
Interesting.
Because
I didn't know that.
They said, most people wait till everybody's kind of like they've had a plenty of wine. In other words, they're a little tipsy, and then you bring out the lower quality stuff. But the guy said, but you waited until everybody's kind of tipsy to bring out the fine wine because this is the best wine. So Jesus didn't just make wine; he made fine wine. Why? Not only it's his quality as creator, but also I just think it's his goodness to his creation. Yeah, maybe there's something tied up in the food business there too, just about the goodness of God.
I like that. I'm feeling a side business coming off for you and me here, the goodness of God creation here, our daily manna. But Craig, this was awesome, man. I'm really excited to kind of round out what the Beyond series looks like here as we kick off the Beyond initiative here, not only over the next 2 years, but what looks like over the next 17.
Yeah.
And also just a slight push here. We are, about 10 days out from Easter now? Ish.
It's coming fast. Yeah, it is coming fast.
Just a quick plug for Easter here at Mission Hills Church. We, at the Littleton campus, we are doing 6 identical services here. And one of the really cool things that we've decided to do this year is usually we have about 1,000 people come for Good Friday, and then we have another, 9 to maybe 10-5 come for Easter services over the course of the weekend. And we came to the conclusion that is 9,000 people-ish that aren't getting the full story, especially as as they are referred to in society as creasters, people that come on just Christmas and Easter. They're kind of missing really one of the paramount pieces of the story here. So this year we are going to, during one of our 6 identical services, you will get the full story from Good Friday through the resurrection for Easter. So I'm really excited for that. So if you go to missionhills.org/Easter, you're able to locate one of our campuses, pick out a time for that, and we'd love to see you guys.
It's going to be awesome. I'm really looking forward to it. This will be a special year. Maybe looking forward to it. Kind of maybe it's one of my favorite Easters ever.
It should be really good. And we would love for you guys to join us here in our last weekend of Beyond. And as always, please send us your questions at info@missionhills.org. We're going to do, Craig and I talked off mic. I can't remember the date quite right now, but we have a mailbag coming up. We'll answer you guys' questions. And as always, if you're looking for some more spiritual questions, check out our playlist, Questions with Craig. And he tackles a bunch of really cool stuff on there. And we'll see you guys next time.
God bless.
This podcast is hosted by Colin McFarland along with Craig Smith. We are mixed, edited, and produced by Zach Anderson. Our creative director is Colin McFarland. Maddie Brouwer is our SEO and copy specialist. The Continuing the Conversation feed is part of the Mission Hills Podcast Network in Littleton, Colorado, and available for download wherever you get your audio and video podcasts. Thanks for listening.